Okay.
Recording in progress.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. As many of you know, my name is Carol Stern, and I'm a librarian here at the Glen Cove Public Library. Before we begin, I just want you to mark your calendars for next month's author, Stephen Mills. He wrote the memoir Chosen. It's a breathtaking book and a little sad, but it's good. Stephen's going to Zoom with us, mark this down, on Tuesday, August 23rd at 2 p.m. That's Tuesday, August 23rd at 2 p.m. So welcome, Etaf. Thank you so much today for joining us in this heat. I hope everybody's staying cool inside. So Etaf, she was supposed to join us at the library before COVID, the world shut down to COVID, and that never happened. So now the book was published in 2019, I believe, and now it's 2022, and here she is. So thank you. So we're really lucky to discuss this book. And I read it in 2019, and I was on vacation a couple of weeks ago, and I reread it again because I didn't remember it so well to discuss it. But I loved it the second time as much as I loved it the first time. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So Etaf is the daughter of Palestinian immigrants. She was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. She has a Master's of Arts in American and British Literature, as well as an undergraduate degree in philosophy and English composition, and teaches undergrad courses in North Carolina, where she lives with her 2 children. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. We'll try to answer them all, and at the end, we'll have a question and answer that everybody can maybe unmute themselves and talk if you'd like. So your characters are so vivid. There were 3 main characters in the book, and the story was so steeped in reality. Sometimes I felt like I was reading a nonfiction book. Can you tell us a little bit about the book? Can you talk about it?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you all for taking the time out of this incredibly hot day to log in and be with us here. It means a lot to me. So I've gotten this question a lot. The book reads like a memoir, or it reads like an autobiography. The events in the novel were inspired by my upbringing. Like Carol said, I am the daughter of Palestinian immigrants. I'm a first-generation American in my family. My parents immigrated here shortly after they got married, and they went on to have me and my brothers and sisters in Brooklyn, New York. So I'm the eldest of 9 children. And much like the conflicts in the novel, the reason why my mom had so many kids is because a boy was very important. And so she kept having girls, and that's why. So a lot of that is very true to my own upbringing. I really wanted to write a novel that gave voice to women in my community, Arab American women living in the US, that have not quite assimilated to American culture, because I feel like there are a lot of cultures and ethnicities out there who have come to this country and have not quite yet assimilated to the culture. And this, they feel displaced in the culture clash, but really true to me as a daughter of immigrants. But also I felt a lot of people would resonate with that. And that's probably why when you read the novel, you really feel like it was written by someone that experienced that, because it was.
So is there a parallel in your life with the women that you wrote about? How much of the book is autobiographical, and which characters are you?
Wow, that's a lot of it is, a lot of it isn't. It's a work of fiction at the end of the day, but obviously all writers write what they know, and I did.
So you're a mother yourself. You said you had 2 children. How did you do differently than your mom has done? Like you're more American, I presume, than your mom was as an immigrant. How has that? What have you done with that? Like it changed from what you knew growing up?
Well, I mean, I think all of us try to do better than our parents have. In the novel, we see 3 generations, and so you clearly see the shift in values from one generation to the next. Ezra is this first, she comes to America and she's struggling to fit in, and Dea is obviously born in this country, so we would imagine that if she were to grow older and have children, she would not want to raise her children in the same way she was raised. And so there, of course, it's natural that I am a little bit less conservative in my upbringing, in my raising of my children than my parents were.
So the book, this theme through the book is literature and reading. Why are books so important to Ezra, Sarah, and Dea? And did you love to read books while you were growing up? I presume you do, because you write so much. So I imagine you love to read too.
Yeah, I didn't realize when I started writing the novel that books were going to be an important theme. It kind of just happened. I found myself writing about these characters, reading all of them. All of them were reading, and they all were connecting to the world through stories. And after really noticing that that was a pattern in my writing, I made it more purposeful. I wanted to convey the power of books and the power of education for women that are sheltered and confined, like Dea and Ezra. They really didn't have the means of education that so many of us are granted. I mean, we're all, so many of us are so privileged that we underestimate the power of not having access to education, or not having access to even just being allowed to leave your home freely, or being allowed to, as a woman in many societies, are not even allowed to, do things that men can't, or be in places without the presence of a male guardian. And so for these characters especially, books are very important. For me personally, books were my bridge to the outside world. They were the only way that I connected with other cultures or learned anything outside of my confined community. And I really wanted to showcase that with these characters, because it's not just an Arab thing, or a cultural thing. People that are isolated, in a sense, in any community, books are their gateway to understanding so much, and their gateway to connecting with other people. So I really wanted to, I guess, say thank you to the books, and make sure that I convey that in A Woman Is No Man.
So why was Farida so threatened by the reading? She didn't want them reading in the book. Like, what was that about?
Farida's character didn't come along to me until later in the novel. It was essentially supposed to be a novel about Ezra and Dea, back and forth, like a mother-daughter story. And I realized about halfway through writing the novel that Farida was there as a character, but we only saw her from Dea's perspective, or Ezra's perspective. And halfway through the writing of the novel, I realized that she needed her own chapters, that her mindset was essential to understanding not just the trauma that these women have faced, but also the history, like where it started and how old-rooted these beliefs are. They're bigger than Dea, and they're bigger than Ezra, and they're even bigger than Farida. But I wanted to use her as a way to show that sometimes we're just comfortable in the past, or comfortable with how things are, even if they are toxic. And to her, books were the unknown. Books were not the cooking and the cleaning. Books challenged some of these presumptions that women were supposed to, just be obedient until they left one man's house to another man's house. Books challenged that, because they gave these women a glimpse of a world that they couldn't otherwise see. And so obviously, not just Farida, but anyone who is comfortable with the status quo would find books, especially certain books, to be very threatening.
Yeah, very. It's funny, there was this book that I just finished reading last night called Emotional Inheritance. I don't know if you read it, but it talks about how your parents and your grandparents, how they influence how you become. And you get stuck in their lives, and it's very hard to change your life. And it seems like this is a theme that ran through your book. You talked about obedience. Why is obedience so important in a society? Like, why do you think that is?
So I'm just writing the book title down because I think it's very interesting, and I have to read it. The Emotional Inheritance.
It was really interesting. It really talked about, how your children born or so influenced by what has happened, it's almost like a gene in them that it's hard to escape.
Yeah. Can you repeat your question?
So why is obedience so important in a society, in your society? Like what, can you talk about that a little? You talk about trauma, you just talked about oppression, and it's a dangerous thing to me, like.
Well, I think obedience, I'm going to rephrase your question a little bit just because I want to put a little disclaimer here. Although I write about this Arab American community, this isn't my attempt to be the single voice for what it means to be Arab American, nor was it my intention to like paint the society as you have to be obedient. I think we have to be obedient to live in this world. You know, like we're all under a system, whether it's you have to be obedient and follow the rules and get a job, or else you won't make enough money to survive, in a sense. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the culture is very conservative. Some parts of Arab culture are very conservative because the family system depends on the woman being at home. And so if the woman isn't at home and she's out working or if she's independent, then the family system kind of falls apart. And that's not just true for Arab culture. It's true for many cultures. The West is the only society that has like really, you know, moved past, you know, women are independent. Let's just put our children in daycare and just, you know, move on. But in Arab culture and many cultures that are not in the West, there's still this idea that the woman belongs at home in a sense because of the family unit needs to be preserved. And so it's very extreme in A Woman Is No Man, of course. This is a very conservative family. But the themes here are not unlike themes in a lot of cultures, especially cultures that are still have not assimilated to Western values. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Yeah. I just want to make sure that like we're talking about this book from a more open-minded perspective.
No, I thought it was very eye-opening. You know, really tells you about a culture that you know nothing, or I knew nothing about. Did you get feedback from your community for telling the story?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Absolutely, this was an uncomfortable story to tell and not a pretty one. Of course, you know, I talked about a lot of uncomfortable taboo subjects in my community. And so there were a lot of people that were upset that I was further stereotyping our community. I was further adding to all the ways in which we're discriminated against by the media. And it's true, again, my story is not the single story of what it means to be Arab or Arab American. However, it is a story that happens to many women in our culture and many cultures. And I felt like I owed it to these women to tell their story despite the backlash. And I think it's the most uncomfortable conversations that start change. We can't change unless we dig into the parts of ourselves and our lives that we find too uncomfortable to talk about. So I thought telling the story was necessary, despite the fact that I may have also perpetuated some of these stereotypes, which I don't, you know, which I'm not really proud of or agree with. It's like a catch-22 in a sense. Like I had to do it. Like the women that suffer these truths and these realities needed this story to be told.
Yeah, I agree with you. So the book starts out in Palestine with a girl who's getting ready to marry, and she doesn't know who she's marrying. Ezra's mother says, "What does love have to do with marriage? What is the purpose of arranged marriages and loveless marriages? And is this still common in the culture? Does it go on today?"
Yeah.
Very much. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Do women feel, do you think women feel like they're in prison like you described, or does where they see mothers as only mothers and caretakers and they can't go out and get jobs and stray from their community?
I mean, there are a lot of educated Arab women that do end up, you know, in this generation at least. You know, this book was set in the 90s when the first or second wave of Arabs were coming to the United States of America. So obviously right now in 2022, a lot more Arab women are educated, 30 years later than they were when Isra came to this country. But nonetheless, there are still people all around the world who live in communities and cultures where education is not put first, whether they're in Pakistan or Yemen or Saudi Arabia, where women are raised with the end goal of eventually getting married and having children, and where men are the only ones that are seen as the potential breadwinners. And so it's not that, I think the focus for these women isn't that they're getting an arranged marriage in a sense. It's that it's just what they think is an acceptable. It's just what they've been taught that is acceptable. Like, in Arab culture, you don't date before you get married. You preserve your modesty. You don't, obviously you're a virgin. Like, so all of those things, much like, conservative Catholic culture or even Christian culture, we have the same values. It's just that in Arab culture, it's just not, they haven't been corrupted by the West, I guess. So they're still holding on to these values. So they're not thinking of the arranged marriage. They're more so thinking of, well, how else am I going to get married if I can't date and I can't, so this is the way. And so do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, well, you did it too, right? I think you got married very young.
I did.
Because you did what you were supposed to do. And then
I wasn't thinking of the arranged marriage. I was just thinking, all right, well, I mean, how else was I going to, now in retrospect, I understand that there was like a lot of systematic cultural things going on that led to that decision to get married. But I guess in defense of these women, they're just conditioned to believe that this is their path. So they're not questioning it.
Right. No, it's hard. I mean, I guess living in America, it's hard to understand too, versus when you grow up like that, yeah. It's what's expected of you.
Yeah, well, I think living in America is also like not really the correct term, because I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn, and I grew up in one street, all the Asian kids lived conservative lives. The Hasidic Jews in the block over lived even more conservative lives than I did. I used to look at them and think I was free. I used to look at the Hasidics and think I was free. So I don't think it's living in America. I think that most Americans just don't look outside their bubble to the other world. They just assume that the West has the standard of living that everyone lives by, and they don't think that other cultures and communities live differently. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Even if they live right next door.
Right. So I don't want to get political, but the West has its problems too. I mean, look what's going on in the world right now with women's issues and women's rights. I mean, I don't know, I don't want to get political and get into political beliefs here, but it's a problem, I think, in the United States too, that's going on right now.
Yeah, I guess, and I think for me that I've learned, and I want to make sure that I practice this myself, is to not spread this, oh no, poor them. Oh, poor them, they live such like oppressed lives. As someone who's lived a very sheltered and oppressed, I guess, I've learned to move past that and instead try to look at people with more empathy. Because it's one thing for you to look around at people with more empathy and try to really understand their culture and the history and the trauma and where it's trickled down from, than to think that like your way is the right way, I guess, or to look at people with pity. And again, let's just move on to the book.
I talk about Sarah, you talk about Sarah. So she had to defy her family. And she sacrificed a lot. I mean, she sacrificed her identity to have some independence. Can you talk about her? I mean, I felt so sorry for her, and I rooted for her. Like you're in such conflict there.
Yeah, I mean, I loved writing about Sarah. I felt like a lot of people are Sarah. They're doing things in their life that, whether they're coming from a strict culture or not, but they're following the status quo in a sense. Whether it's getting married and having children, or getting the decent job, but that's not really what you want to do. It's, in a sense, we all, despite our culture are restricted in a sense. And to me, Sarah really portrayed the extremity of what that means in Arab culture. Like in Arab culture, if you went against in conservative an Arab family like Sarah's, she couldn't just leave. Like she was disowned in a sense. So she kind of had to run away because she couldn't just leave and say, hey guys, I'm moving out. I'm gonna just go chill in Europe for a few years. And then, like women in those types of families don't have that option. Right. And I really wanted to show that it's still possible through Sarah to do that, to live a life that is yours, but also not glamorize it too, to show that it's difficult.
Yeah, it seemed it in the book. I mean, she was strong. So what about Adam? So he was the most violent man in the story to me. I thought he was abusive to Ezra. And while she kept giving birth to girls, he didn't like that. I guess you wrote that, you said it at the beginning that you wrote that because that's what happened in your family while you had 9 children. Is that how you started this character, or is that how you got to him, or how did this come about?
Yeah, to me, Adam is the typical Arab man, I guess. And he was just put together from a lot of men that I've met in my life. And I don't think, although he is abusive, I tried to paint him with as much empathy as possible because, the story isn't a black and white story. It's not women are oppressed, men are oppressors. It's really about intergenerational trauma for these occupied Palestinians and how their trauma trickled down from the Israeli occupation all the way till they came to America, all the way inside their domestic homes. And that the powerlessness that these people faced, that these men faced, also trickled down into like the way they treated their wives and the way they treated their children. So to me, it was just very important while pointing out the domestic issues because I wanted to start a conversation in my culture about it. But it was also important for me to paint Adam as a human being because he's also a victim of violence too.
Yeah, he is a victim also. I thought he was a financial victim. I mean, there was so much responsibility put on him to support the entire family. That's not an easy task either. I mean, part of me felt as violent and as you didn't like him for what he did with his wife, you felt sorry for him a little. I mean, there was some sort of empathy there.
Yeah, sure.
So what do you hope? You keep saying it. So what's your ultimate goal of what people will get out of the book? I mean, what do you don't want it. You keep saying what you do. You don't want people to just think of one side, that it's an oppressed culture. What do you want people to get out of it?
Well, I wanted to obviously help people empathize with others. I want people to read this story and look outside themselves, appreciate their privilege, learn about women and men in other communities that don't have the same privileges that we have here in the West. We are extremely privileged. And my disclaimer was that I didn't want it to be this. Obviously, when we read a book, we learn, right? We empathize with these characters and we learn from them, and we feel like we're different people. The perspective that we move on with and we look at the world through is changed every single time you read a book. I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that it's one thing to empathize with people in a community and another thing to leave a book just with pity. Because it's not about like feeling bad for these characters. It's more about understanding your place in the world through understanding their place in the world. So it's like when you understand their place in the world, the goal is for me to help people better understand their place. How could they do better with their privilege, with their time, the way they treat people around them, a woman at the grocery store, their neighbor. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
It's really to just add more light and more empathy into the world by, not looking at people, for example, growing up after 9/11, when you see an Arab or a Muslim in the street, 99 99 out of 10, you're thinking, oh, like a terrorist, or oh, it's a negative view that lacks empathy. And so I just wanted to create a conversation that was, rooted in empathy.
So as an Arab American, do you feel that discrimination? When you walk down the street, do you feel like people do that to you?
Well, I don't look Arab American, but if I did, yes.
Do people in your family say that? I mean,
Yes, people in my family face discrimination all the time. The ones that are actually like wearing the headscarf and stuff.
right, they face discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
So the ending of the book had a lot of questions for me. Can you give us some insight on the ending? I'm assuming that most of everybody here has read the book, so we're not going to do any book spoilers, but can you talk about it a little?
Sure. So by the end of the novel, we already know Isra's fate. It's spelled out to the reader, and we kind of see it coming in a sense, but we don't know what happened, right? We just know that she died, and we want to know how she died. And so I didn't want to take the reader into the scene of her death, because I felt by the end of the novel, it was my instinct that we were already like too depressed. The novel was so traumatic and heavy, and we already understood that she was beat. There was no need to show us another scene of that. I wanted to end the novel on Isra's moment of hope. To her, the point of the novel was she went from a passive, people-pleasing girl to someone who wanted to stand up to the system and save her daughters. That was, to me, the climax, the highlight of her growth. And I wanted to empower her by ending the story in that moment in the train when she's trying to leave with her daughters. There are clues in the novel that Adam finds her in the train station. But I didn't want to end the scene with the doors opening and then her seeing Adam or running into him in the train station. I thought that would be anticlimactic in a sense. But I also wanted to play into the idea that, when we get to the end of the story, the actual last chapter, we realize that Dea is the one that wrote the story, right? When we get to the end, we realize she's in the book, she's in the library, she's looking at the books and thinking, maybe one day she could tell the story. So when we get to the novel, I also wanted the reader to think that maybe Dea wanted to end her mother's story there. She didn't want to end her mother's story by describing how she died. She wanted to end her mother's story with hope.
Right.
Because Dea is telling us the story. So I kind of left it up to interpretation, because I thought that I wanted the reader to kind of leave them think, wait a minute, what? But we already know how she died. So like, why go and relive it? She doesn't deserve that. It adds no value. Seeing her die adds no value. What adds the value is seeing her change.
So how long did it take you to write this book?
It took me a year to write the first draft of it. And then I sold it, and me and my editor worked on it before it was published.
And what was the biggest challenge you had in writing it? Like what?
The biggest challenge I had was, the biggest and the funnest, it was the funnest, was figuring out where to end each chapter and start the new one. Intertwining the three perspectives. I really wanted to write a page-turning novel. Like, to me, that was like very important for me to have the readers really experience these characters and not want to let them go.
And you did that well. You really did that. I couldn't put the book down.
I remember sitting on the floor for months with the chapters on index cards all over the floor, and just like moving them around on the floor and seeing, all right, how would, all right, we're here. All right, what should come next? What would make the most sense? Just moving the index cards on the floor until I felt like I had the reveals in the right place, the emotional moments in the right place. Writing is very, it's an art, and it's fun, but it's, yeah. it was emotional. It was an emotional book for sure.
So was it very difficult to write those emotional scenes? I mean, was that hard for you?
Oh yeah. No matter how many times I edited certain scenes in the novel, I would cry like I'd read them for the first time. There were certain scenes in the novel that even if like someone were to, like if you were to ask me right now to read it, I would start crying. You know, just because it was just so, it just was very traumatic to like relive or to, you know, because I wanted to write these scenes authentically. So I had to really put my body back in those emotions and try to deliver them.
So how did you, yeah, go ahead. How did you do the research for this? How did you do all your research?
I didn't need to do any research.
You just wrote it. You just wrote it on in your community of people that you thought lived through. I mean, how did you do that?
I mean, the novel was based on a lot of things in my upbringing, so it wasn't really difficult to write. Yeah.
So how did you come up with Ezra, like the character?
She was based on my mom.
On your mom.
Yeah.
So the title.
Yes.
I had read somewhere that it wasn't the original title, it was changed. And the original title was The Place an Arrow Shoots From.
Yes.
Why did you change it?
That wasn't the original title either. When I sold the novel, the book was actually, I had actually called it All the Silent Sounds. But I think it reminded some people of some song that I don't know because I never heard. But so The Place an Arrow Shoots From then became the title. And it was based on a Sylvia Plath quote where she says something like, I don't want to be the place an arrow shoots from. I want to be the arrow itself. That like women are the place the arrow shoots from and men are the arrow. And she wanted to be the arrow. So I thought, but you know, obviously, unless you know the quote, you won't get the title. And the title also felt very heavy tonguey, like saying it wasn't as marketable. So no one was really convinced of it until the end, where I just said, all right, let's just pull a phrase from the novel. And I pulled A Woman Is No Man because Farida says it to Sarah, I think. And I just thought, well, this is exactly what the novel's about. So why don't we just call it that?
You also wrote it. I wrote it down on page 169. You wrote it down to your mother. You said a woman will always be a woman, but a woman is no man. I mean, when you were writing to your mom, you know, you said life here is so different from life here isn't so different from life back home with all the cooking, cleaning, folding, and ironing. And the women here, they live no better. They still scrub floors and raise children and wait on men to order them around. A part of me hoped that women would be liberated in this country. And you were right, Mama, a woman will always be a woman and a woman is no man. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I'm glad that the title is what it is because that's the simple truth of it.
Right. So you have 9 siblings. How did they all react to the book? Did they like the book? Did they not like the book? Were they happy you wrote it? Did they get feedback?
They all cried reading it.
They all cried.
Yeah, a lot of them are younger, so not all of them read it. So I mean, I still have like little brothers, but my sisters all read it and they all loved it. They all cried.
And what about your mom? You said she was Ezra. How did she react to it? Did she agree with it, or did she help you with this? Or
no, she didn't. I don't know if she read it, but at the time, I had like some personal things. I had gotten a divorce and I was kind of disowned for that. So I didn't really speak to my parents for like the whole time. I just recently got back in touch with them. So I'm not sure what their reactions are on this at all, really.
So that wasn't easy for you either. I mean,
I told you I didn't really have to do any research.
Yeah, so you could have been Sarah also.
In any of them.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you want to talk about your next book a little?
Yes, I would love to. My next book is coming out in March of next year. It's called Evil Eye, and it's about a young woman who, born and raised in this country, thinks she has it all, but something happens at work, and the next thing she knows, her life is, like falling to pieces, and memories from the past are coming back to haunt her, and she realizes that there are some things that she hasn't really dealt with, and we kind of learn more about it. So it's the themes are very similar to A Woman Is No Man, but it's set in the American South.
The American South.
Yes.
I'll be sure to read it when it comes out. So we have actually 39 questions in the chat. So I'm going to start asking some of them if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, let's go. Let me get to the top of that. Okay, so Stephanie Nilkins wrote, "This was such a terrific book. I totally agree. I'm looking forward to reading it. I chose your book for my next book club meeting in August. It was amazing. I'm also from Dyker Heights near Bay Ridge."
I love Dyker Heights. I used to spend all Christmases in Dyker Heights looking at all the lights as a kid, like we'd walk around. Thank you.
Donna Data said she's from Detroit, Michigan. Stephanie Nilkins said again, "My book club loved the book unanimously." Mona Norman said, "Many of us were reading and enjoying the book before the meeting was on our schedule. Our book club read it in a generated conversation. I'm from Brooklyn, and it made everything more realistic. I'm from Bay Ridge, from Brooklyn, and I live in Boca Raton." Let's keep going. I'm looking for some questions. "We read it for our book club in Boynton Beach. We all enjoyed the book and had much to discuss." Hello from Miami, Florida. What's the next book? We answered that. "I suggested the book for my book club. After reading it, we all enjoyed it, and we were upset by many of the aspects of it. I was born in Brooklyn and now living in North Carolina part-time. Very easy to figure out that much of the book was based on author's life or relatives." Let's see. Thank you everyone for joining. "Did you get any backlash from your community in the Brooklyn neighborhood?" You sort of talked about that. They lived in the neighborhood that is clearly depicted in the book. Beautifully written. Do you have a boy, or were you concerned about having a boy? Do you have a child that's a boy?
I do. Yeah, I have a daughter and a son. I was definitely concerned about when I was pregnant with my son. I was definitely, you can only imagine having grown up in a house where your mother has 9 children because she couldn't have sons, and the shame that it brought her. I'm sure you can only imagine, what I felt as a kid, pregnant, with another kid, with that I already have a girl. I'm still a kid myself, and I'm wondering if I'm going to have my mother's fate, having all these children, But luckily he was a boy, and I stopped having any more kids.
So go read that book, Emotional Inheritance. It talks about this. Were you and your siblings encouraged to go to college?
We were encouraged to go to college, but it was more important that we got married. So we were encouraged to get married. It didn't really matter whether we went to college. My parents, obviously, I'm a lot older now. My parents are doing better with the younger ones now.
What number was the first boy?
5.
So she had 5 girls before she had a boy?
So she had 4 girls. The boy was number 5.
Good luck to your mom, right? That's a lot of children. Let's see what this one, what does she write? Questions on the paradox mentioned. Goal was accomplished to come to America and live the American dream of home, business, ownership, education. Your characters are not allowed by parents to allow children to assimilate more.
Yes, and that's one of the things that Dea questions in the novel. She's wondering, well, why did you come to this country if you don't want us to take on some of these American values or American dreams? Why did you come? And I think that's the complicated question here, is that they didn't want. A lot of people that come to this country, they're coming to this country out of survival, not because they necessarily wanted to come. It's just that they live in war or violence or poverty. And if they don't come, they'll die. So it's they're coming, but they don't want to sign their soul, Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, sure.
There's a conflict. I'm not saying that they're right. I'm saying there's a conflict, and it's understandable why they would want to hold on to their culture, because they're already throwing away their identity when they come to this country.
Right. And they say that, it's hard for immigrants. They don't speak the language well. And, you also don't know what you're getting yourself into.
You also don't want to like lose your children. There's a fear like you're going to lose them once they go in the world, because I don't know.
No, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean,
Exactly.
Your character Farita, I mean, at first you didn't like her, but then when you kept on reading, she was really a very nice woman and tried very hard. She was in a bind also.
Yeah, like you could understand that she's toxic, but you could see where it's coming from,
Correct. That's a good question, I think, by Donna Natif. It was mentioned in your bio that you live at home with your 2 children. Are you married? Did you remarry?
I did.
And you picked, not your parents.
Yes, he's the love of my life.
That's good. The question relates to the taboo around women who go outside her cultural norms. How did your family feel about the book? We answered that. Will you continue to write about Arab American women, or will you write on an unrelated topic?
My next book is about Arab American women. I still felt like I had a little bit more to say, but I don't know about the future, what I will write. I feel like I want to help everyone, so I don't know.
How much input did you have in the title of in the title and the cover? The cover of it?
A lot. My publisher is really, really nice. They listen.
Are they any movie aspect? Has anybody approached you for a movie or anything?
It's being optioned right now, so crossing my fingers.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great. Do you personally have any negative repercussions once the book was published and popular?
Just the slight backlash, but nothing crazy.
Well, this is an interesting question. How does one change the cycle of trauma through the generations? How do you find a voice in these cultures?
You just have to, like Dea, just listen to your own voice and try to change that narrative of trauma. Try to make decisions that are not rooted in people pleasing, but are rooted in your own, deep desire to like fulfill why you were here. We're all sent here for a reason. And sometimes it's hard to like find your path when you feel really conflicted. So about following a path that's prescribed to you. So I would just say, it takes a lot of courage and bravery to break away, but you just have to try to follow your intuition and know that you're going to lose a lot of people on the way.
It's hard. I mean, that's really very challenging. Being the firstborn male in a family can be difficult. He had dreams as well. Yeah, I thought so too in the book. How can American-born raised people create friendships with women we see who are wearing a hijab? Specifically, how can we help women who want to be more acclimated?
I guess you can't really help someone that doesn't want to be helped. So just being kind and not belittling or condescending. I think just kindness and non-judgmental, presence, listening is sometimes more powerful than anything you can do. Just listening and empathizing with people and not necessarily trying to help or save them.
There was I can't remember the name of it. There was a movie out about a Hasidic woman who left her community, and she has, what was the name of it?
It's based on the book Unorthodox.
Yeah, right. And how she had to give up her child. I mean, it's very difficult. I loved how you showed 2 sides to the characters. We can say that there's an internal conflict in Adam, Farida, etc. They understand that their treatment is wrong at times, but they don't know how to break the cycle. They believe it is necessary to preserve and survive in their culture. My parents are Italian immigrants. There are many similarities. Wanted to say I live in New York, grew up in Brooklyn, and know many of the places mentioned. This Park Slope, Bay Ridge. It was lovely to hear the area described vividly. Thank you. She wanted to know the date of your next book. Again, you want to repeat that?
March 14, 2023.
Someone wrote, sad you had separated from your family. It must be really difficult for all of you. Glad you have reunited. The cycle of change is in motion for your children. Proud, very proud of you. She said, I cried reading your book and I'm crying again as you speak about your writing. I absolutely knew that the book was based on your life experiences and those of your culture. I'll be reading this. I didn't read it. I'm going to read it. I love the book, but would have loved a glossary of Arabic terms. Any reason you did not provide that?
My publisher didn't ask. I didn't. That's scary.
Do you have a, go ahead.
Too.
Could you say that again? I didn't hear you.
I said a lot of the words were like obvious from the context clues as well. So I just didn't know. I mean, it's good. It's a good thought though, to like have had one.
Are you reading anything you like, or do you have any book recommendations?
At the moment, I'm not reading because I'm editing, but the last thing I think I read was, I think it must have been like Black Cake or Book Lovers, just something, something serious, something fun. Both great books.
Both good. I didn't read either one of them.
Both good books.
So Ruth Galaxy wrote, I'm disturbed about Israel throwing out Palestinians from their homes in 1948. You should have done some research in this area. Any comments?
No.
You cannot write about politics without research. It is well known beating wives in the entire Middle East is accepted. Why blame it on politics?
That's not true. It's actually unaccepted, but it's just part of the culture.
It's part of the culture. Special experience. My mom and I both here today from Richmond, Virginia, read the book together and we were able to talk about it and process it together. We love such a journey. We specifically debated the ending. How did you want to balance? How do you balance wanting to be prideful in your culture and heritage and share that with your children in some capacity while also exposing some of the more difficult tenets of that culture, heritage, and driving change for your community?
I just, I try to, share with them that the toxic parts will not serve them, that they might have served the people that were practicing these things as a survival mechanism, but that there are some toxic parts in our culture. And there's some beautiful things too, like any culture. I mean, I love how, I love showing them that in American culture, we have, the beautiful parts of American culture, the independence and the freedom. And then we also have the toxic part of American culture, which is like the endless alcoholism, drug addictions, mindless sex with anyone that we meet, and addictions to social media. I mean, we have problems in all cultures. So it's not just, I just try to show them the best of both. I mean, my kids are raised very conservatively in terms of, being protected from social media, consumerism, cell phone addiction, video games, stuff like that, because that's a part of the culture that I don't personally agree with. And there's some parts of the Arab culture that I don't personally agree with. I think that's really what what I'd like to end this on too, is taking a closer look at ourselves before we judge or make ourselves and our background more superior to others. Because I think that that's the problem with the West. And a lot of people that read this novel as a way to further justify themselves as, better than. There are clearly problems all over the world, and women are mistreated everywhere. But it's wise to say that while we learn about other cultures, it's also good to take a look at our own American culture here. What are the values that we're perpetuating? We objectify and sexualize women every day. I mean, what's the difference? What's the difference between one culture's way of objectifying women and another culture's way of objectifying women? When we objectify women every single day. literally as soon as every single Disney show that is on TV, I have to turn off because there's subtle messages in there for my daughter that her only worth is to look hot or sexy or to please a boy. So it's in a different way. Do you understand?
Yeah.
It's in a different way. So it's like my job as a writer to speak up for women everywhere. And A Woman Is No Man is for the women that I thought needed it first, which is my women, my Arab women. But hopefully one day I can write about all of us women that are used by capitalism, consumerism, and many different cultures, objectified, sexualized, and used. So that's my intention, is for us to all just take a look at ourselves before we look at others.
Right. So you can write about the book, what's going on with women in the United States now.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. I know it's not good. Because you did not grow up in the South, are you researching your second novel?
No, I've actually been in the South now for 13 years. I moved here when I was 19. So when I got married, that's where my ex-husband was. He's from North Carolina. So I've been in North Carolina for 13 years now. So I don't have to research anymore either.
Oh, this is a nice question. What was it like getting your first book published?
It was surreal. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that my voice was being heard, and I couldn't believe it. I honestly was like, what is happening? But I think deep down I knew. Deep down I knew that it would, like, I knew that this was my path. I just knew it was. Because when I left my husband, I hadn't sold my novel.
You did not.
So like, I hadn't, no, it was before that. So it's like, I knew that, you know, the universe was looking out for me.
And it became so popular. I mean, it was, and still is.
Yeah. I think because there's something real there that people can feel when they read it.
Yeah, it's the next question. The younger son did break away with his wife after they had a child. Why did you have another family member be strong enough to break away?
Because that's how life is. Some people are strong and some people are weak.
That's true. Is your new husband Arabic or is he American?
He's a Southern white boy.
Has he met your parents?
Yes, he has just recently met them, like a couple of months ago, for the first time.
For the first time.
For the first time, yeah.
Are they okay with it?
Yeah, they've accepted him.
When Ezra was being abused and beaten, how come the family didn't intervene?
Because it's just normalized in the culture, and although it's not accepted, the women are all powerless. So it's like they kind of feel, what are you going to do? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard not to judge that, but yeah.
No, but it's kind of like, you know, the woman that her husband's an alcoholic and he's cheating on her all day, or he's messaging girls on Instagram all day, or he's out at the bar all day. Like it's you know, the women that are under domestic violence or emotional abuse, they feel pressure to stay in those situations, and they don't often have the outside help or support, especially if they're not educated and they can't financially support themselves. That's really like what it boils down to.
Listen, people who are abused in this country too, you know, it's hard for them to get out, and they keep perpetuating the same thing generation after generation. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, and women try to intervene and help. It's just for Ezra's situation, she was all in a different country and she felt powerless. You know, there are situations where men do face the consequences of that in the community, and then there are situations where they don't face the consequences. You know, it's just a very tricky. Again, this is not a single story of what it means to be Arab American. This is one of them.
Right. No, I totally get it. It definitely is powerful that it makes you like stop and think. My nieces both grew up in Brooklyn and have female Muslim friends. The college sophomore said over and over again that her Muslim friends were going to college but weren't allowed to go from home, even though they were accepted to phenomenal. Is that common?
Yes.
Frida never addressed Adam about his drinking, knowing that she allowed her husband to drink. Very interesting. Thank you. I love the book. Gave it 4.7 stars, but absolutely broke my heart. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent interview. Lots to think about. I love the book. Looking forward to Evil Eye. The only difference between men and women are their sexual organs that you're born with. The rest either talk to us, modeled, or forced upon us. Are you glad you're able to speak for women everywhere? And what do your children think of the book? They're young, your kids, all right?
They're younger, yeah, but they're very proud of me, but they haven't read it.
Do you want me to keep going? We keep getting new messages. Do you have time or?
Actually don't. I have another meeting
Okay.
but it was really lovely. This is such an honor. I wanted to say thank you for everyone who's read this. The fact that you've even picked up this book shows so much about your passion and your care and your empathy for the world and your desire to learn more. So that to me means a lot. And I hope you continue reading books that challenge you, that frustrate you. I hope you continue looking outward and inward. Thank you so much. And I really hope you guys all read Evil Eye.
Oh, we will. Thank you. And
so
thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys so much. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Etaf. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna
Thank
end.
you for arranging this.
Say again.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Hi, Nancy.